Welcome to Vision Pros, the show all about spatial computing, visionOS, and getting work done on the Apple Vision Pro. I'm Tim Chatton, host of the show.
Yeah, one of the bits of feedback that I heard from one of our support team recently was that, he really enjoyed, in the past when he would go to visit the in-laws, he would bring, a bunch of different devices with him. And now he finds that he can often just bring his phone and his Apple Vision Pro, and that's, or maybe, the laptop as well. But it sort of takes the role of so many of those other things, and just in one kind of compact package.
Welcome to another episode of Vision Pros. As you can hear, I'm still recovering from a cold, but rest assured, the actual interview was before I started to lose my voice. So on today's episode is the first returning guest, Ken Case. Ken Case is the CEO of the OmniGroup and has now launched OmniPlan and OmniFocus for the Apple Vision Pro. In this episode, we discuss his feelings about this brand new platform, making the Apple Vision Pro standard equipment for every employee at the OmniGroup, and dive deep into OmniFocus for visionOS. And finally, we close by touching on OmniPlan for visionOS and his hopes both as a user and developer at WWDC. As a reminder, you can support this podcast and get early access to both Vision Pros and Apple Pros over at visionpros.fm/Patreon or by subscribing to Apple Podcasts. Another awesome way to support this podcast is by leaving a review in Apple Podcasts. My thanks to those that have taken the time to do so. I've even noticed a few pop up in some other countries outside the United States, which is always fun to see. So if you have a minute, please open up the Apple Podcast app and leave a review. It helps send the right signals to Apple, display the show more in search, helping others discover the show. With that, here's my second discussion with Ken Case, all about visionOS and the OmniGroup's apps. Welcome back to the podcast, Ken.
Thank you, Tim. It's great to be here again.
Yeah, you're the first returning guest. We had you on this summer before this launch, many months later, and it's now out. You've released a couple of apps, and it's no longer hypothetical and something we're living with day in, day out. So,
yeah, that's the best thing about this, right? Is that we get a chance to actually. Back then, we were looking forward to the future and thinking about what we were hoping for and dreaming about, and now we get to say, okay, what actually happened?
Yeah. So how are you finding it? How has it etched its way into your computing life? What kind of role does it serve for you these days?
Sure. So for me, I find myself using it basically every day.
Yeah.
Not every day on the weekends necessarily, but every workday. Let's put it that way. And at least somewhat on the weekends for entertainment.
Yes.
Just because it's fun for watching movies.
Sure.
And so on.
The new Godzilla movies in 3D.
Right. But in my daily life, the way I find myself using it the most would be as a big screen for my Mac. Which is, of course, one of the ways I anticipated using it, but I wasn't sure for sure how well that would work out, how comfortable it would be, all of those sorts of factors. And I know everybody's mileage is different for that, but for me at least, it's worked out really well.
So you're mainly using it at least for work in your. Imagine you probably have a home and work office, right? Or what's kind of your mix of working from the work office versus the home office?
Well, ever since the pandemic, mostly work at home. I do have an office still at the office that I'll go to occasionally and, do some paperwork there or whatever as needed. But 99% of my work these days is done from home, as is true for everybody at Omni. We're all working.
Okay, interesting. And then Mac Studio, is that your current Mac computer?
Yeah.
Okay. Gotcha. And then when you're working on the Apple Vision Pro through the Mac, are you finding yourself using visionOS apps alongside it? Or what's your Mac doing versus the visionOS apps?
So I find myself mostly using the Mac because I'm using tools like Xcode and Terminal and so on. And most of my work involves those sorts of things, but I'll also have an OmniFocus window over to one side and, an Omni Outliner window over on the other side maybe. And, I'll kind of be framing this big Mac screen that's in the center of my workspace with other things that kind of come and go from visionOS. And they won't always be open, but I'll open them as I need them and use them.
Gotcha. And have you done any modifications to the headset? I am personally now rocking 2 solo bands and
I find that much more comfortable. Are you just using
I
the
have
stand?
tried that
Yep.
experiment. I've ran through several different experiments
Okay.
actually, just to kind of see, um, if you go to search, I'm sure as you know,
Yeah.
if you go to Etsy and you search for what are people doing, there are all kinds of crazy modifications that people are doing. And I tried, the one that will lift it up off your forehead a little bit, and
Yes.
you take the face shield off. And I tried the top band adapters and so on, and those were all, I think, useful experiments. But mostly what I found is, if I just adjust the solo headband and push it down a little bit further on the back of my head,
Uh-huh.
I kind of found a better balance there that worked for me. And then suddenly I was like, okay, right now I'm just using the stock thing, although I do still have the adapters. Like I got the adapters that fit over the developer band. So I have my
Yeah.
developer band on, so it's not quite stock in that sense.
Mhm.
And I have those adapters for a top band that are currently sort of fitting over that,
Okay.
but they're not actually hooked to a band. I don't have that band on. Right?
Gotcha. Yeah. Okay. Interesting. Yeah. I love the solo band, but yeah, I could never get it to just be comfortable for long, long periods of time. And then I found the dual band, the angles were just way off for how it, like, it just was not comfortable at all for that. Yeah.
Right. Yeah, again, I played around with a bunch of them, and then I just came back to this one, and I don't know whether it was just my, experimenting with it over time or getting used to it or what, but then this was fine. And I know, again, I'm lucky that way.
Yeah.
It's not true for everybody. And I know some people are really bothered by the field of vision, and I realized maybe the reason that never has bothered me is because I wear glasses, and so I don't have that field of vision. Everything out there is just a blur normally.
Yeah.
And in some way, go ahead.
Oh, I was gonna say, yeah, it's kind of nice having like I see my computer better in the Vision Pro because I got the perfect prescription for everything I'm looking at versus like computer distance and dealing with it's nice.
Right,
Everything just looks great in there. Yeah.
I don't have to take off my glasses to read things.
Yeah, exactly.
Put them back on.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. But yeah, the field of view I would love in Gen 2 if they improved upon that because I know like PSVR 2 it's noticeably wider and it's like that could be one area where they touch it up a bit. Yeah.
Yeah.
So so when you use a keyboard and trackpad with the Vision Pro, is it exclusively through the Mac, or do you also have a different setup you'd use away from that for just visionOS stuff?
So I tried getting like a one of those little, I don't know, Lucite trays that you can put a standalone keyboard and trackpad in, and using that for a little bit. And then what I found was I'm mostly using Mac apps with my keyboard anyway, and so most of the time. I just use the Mac keyboard.
Gotcha. Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, so if that's where you're doing most of your work,
right?
So some of the things from episode 3, I believe, from last year that we need to circle back on. We were wondering about first off, focal distance. Do we actually know what it is at this point? I know for me, it's more comfortable having stuff in the distance. I'm not quite sure how far out it is, and yeah,
right. I don't know I still don't know, I guess.
Yeah.
The short answer. It seems comfortable to me, whatever it is, but
yeah, you're finding that you're using Windows far away. You're not bringing stuff up close often.
Not very often, no. Yeah. Like right now, I have you an arm's distance away.
Yeah.
And then I have my Mac, probably, I don't know, 6 or 8 feet away or something, right?
Yeah, the weirdest thing I still haven't figured out is why reading lenses are a thing for Vision Pro, because to my knowledge, it's a distance optimized experience. Do you have any idea what the deal is with people ordering reading glasses for this is?
Oh, I wish I knew more about what the optics were.
Yeah, I do too. It's like situation. It's very confusing to me because it's like it's a distance device, I thought.
And it's disappointing for at least one of our team because they have a really strong nearsighted prescription. And, they can't even see the E normally, and apparently it's too strong. Zeiss doesn't make those lenses for the Vision Pro, so they can only use it with contacts.
Gotcha.
So that makes, and since they don't normally wear contacts because their eyes prefer not to have they when they use the Vision Pro, it's a context shift for them, right? They have to decide, today I'm going to use the Vision Pro, I'm putting in my contacts, I'm putting on the Vision Pro, and now I'm probably going to use it a lot today. And then,
not so much
it's a big transition both in and out.
Yeah. And then the other thing, interoperability, like multitasking between apps. Like Are you finding it's really nice to just drag stuff in the OmniFocus from some other app, from Safari, and what's that been like for you?
Well, I love that that the Vision Pro does support multitasking really well, right? In terms of
Yeah.
all, not having to. It's a very different experience from other VR, AR environments that I've used in the past, where there was really just kind of one app active at a time and it took over your experience. And now instead I can have different things from different apps open and copy and paste between them, drag and drop between them, send, do sharing between them, or whatever. That all of those things that we're just sort of used to from our productivity environments on other Apple platforms, now working on this new platform as well. So, I knew that was going to be a game changer for how much I would be able to use this in a working environment, and that's certainly proven to be the case as now it's actually happened.
Yeah, the multitasking has been very useful to get around one of Safari's nastiest bugs. I'm not sure if you've ever tried this, but anytime I go to Safari and pick the file picker out to upload, say, a podcast, the entire Vision Pro will do a hard reset. All my apps will just crash. They're all gone. Need to start from scratch. If I'm exporting something in LumaFusion, you got to start that over because everything's wiped out because I decided to open up the file picker in Safari.
Right.
It'll just slowly start to slow down the system, then boom. So I drag and drop from the Files app now. And on the occasions I forget about this bug that was introduced in like 1.1, I'm in for a rough time.
Right. Oh man, that does sound like a rough.
Yeah. So hopefully,
I'm glad that's not part of my workflow.
Yeah. Right. Yeah. I'm hopeful visionOS 2 will fix that because it's stuck around with all these point updates we've gotten since then. It's like still not fixed. Okay.
Right. Yeah. For me, because I do, again, since so much of my work does center around the Mac, I'm mostly using the Vision Pro as almost a Mac accessory, right?
Yeah, right.
With that, it helps expand my workspace and, maybe gives me a more focused environment. Or, one of the things that I have done quite a bit over the few months now that this device has been in my hands is, I'll just take it with me as I'm running an errand or something. Like I take my daughter to college class or something, and I'm waiting for that. And as I'm just sitting in the parking lot, I'll put on the Vision Pro and have my laptop out, and now I've got this nice big workspace where I can do some coding.
Yeah, and the laptop's such a great form factor with this because like keyboard and trackpad anywhere you go, and make that screen much more comfortable to work on. You're not bending over in your car trying to.
Right.
Yeah, it seems like a natural fit there.
Yeah, and just dial into the one of the environments that I usually like, the Mount Hood environment.
Yeah. So
the lake and the trees and everything. I'm just. Yeah.
Have you noticed sometimes it rains in Mount Hood? I love that.
Yeah. It's drizzling right now.
The first time it did it, it was snowing outside, and I thought, oh, somehow they have it tied to my local weather data. If it's precipitating, it's going to rain here. But that's not the case. Right. It's just a random loop. Yeah.
Right.
One day they'll have even more fine-tuned environments with that stuff. Yeah.
Yeah.
So you do find yourself using the environments? Like how often are you in more augmented reality versus being in an environment?
I would say I would say that I often will tune in about halfway.
Yeah.
So, the nearby environment might see, the desk maybe in front of me,
yes.
or and my lap and things around to the right and behind me and so on is the real environment. But then it fades into Mount Hood or whatever.
Yeah.
And then most of the things that I'm working on are set against that backdrop.
Yeah. One of the great things about environments I didn't know until we got this was if you stand up and start walking, it'll exit your environment right away. And then if you sit back down in the chair you were at, it'll turn that environment right back on.
Right.
It's super cool. Especially like movie theater. If you're in the cinema mode, you can just stand up, start walking, and it'll turn the environment off. And then you sit back down, back in the movie theater. It's really well done with that.
Yeah. I mean, there were so many things that we just didn't know until we actually got our hands on it to try it, right?
Yeah. So, visionOS apps, what have you discovered as some of your favorites so far?
Oh, interesting. So obviously the Mac screen sharing
Yes,
is built
great
in
app.
is for me. It's what makes this a tool that I'm productively using all the time.
Yeah.
But I also have enjoyed like the Screens app. It's not quite the same fidelity, but then I can connect to additional devices that are around. I have more than one Mac at home, and so that's nice to be able to put other screens of things up around and do things with. I've Goodness, what are all of these apps that I've got installed on here right now? I'd have to go through quite a few pages here as I sort of think about. I've found myself not doing, like, I've downloaded a few of the games, but I really don't play very many of them. It's not an activity that I do on here. Very much unlike how I've done any sort of previous headset.
Yeah, which are game first,
Right,
Yeah.
exactly. Or exercise sort of things. I don't really do those so much on here either.
No, I would not want to get. Yeah, me either. That's what my other ones are for. I don't want to get that all sweaty and
right.
It's a little bit heavier, or how it's laid out feels heavier for exercise.
But of course, I use our apps.
Yes, as we will be talking about very soon here. They are wonderfully well done.
But that is one of the things I think that for sort of productivity uses, if you don't have a use for the particular apps that are currently available on the platform, might hold you back, right? If you don't,
right.
This is still it's easy to forget that we're only a couple months into this platform. And it's a whole new thing for people to develop for. So in terms of the third-party apps that I could immediately start getting into and using, well, of course, there are things like the Disney app and other entertainment properties that were obvious use cases that anybody could get into and start using and playing around with. And part of this makes me wonder, well, how far back did Apple start thinking about their content and being able to make sure that there would be content available on this device on day one by starting up their own studio, producing their own content, right?
My biggest surprise is they don't do more 3D conversions of their shows, because that seems like something they could do at not a great expense to existing content. Like, let's have the Legacy, the Monarch show be in 3D, stuff like that. Yeah. For All Mankind, put that in 3D. Yeah.
But then you have to worry about all the challenges around just how it's, is the pace of editing appropriate for 3D? Are you going to get whiplash as you start to feel scene shifting?
I mean, for 3D conversions, I don't think that's as much of an issue as the immersive stuff, which is...
That's true. Yeah, it's not like 180 degree.
Right. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, so I'd love to see more of that. I hope they do more of that, because 3D movies have been great to see the trickle out of those getting added every couple weeks or so.
Yeah.
How often are you watching movies? Do you have the time to get away from joint watching with the family to watch a movie in Vision Pro?
Oh, I don't have a lot of time, but there are certainly movies that, like, I've gotten through a lot more of the movies that I was interested in watching that they were not interested in watching.
Yes.
Like, okay, this is a great opportunity to watch whatever it is, and then they don't have to, I'll put in the AirPods, so they don't have to hear it either.
Yeah,
it's worked out.
No, it's definitely great for that. As far as visionOS apps, have you noticed any design trends that maybe we didn't anticipate before launch? Has that started to creep up yet, or are we still too new in the platform?
Well, I don't know if we're too new in the platform, but maybe I haven't been paying enough attention to all of this. I would love to hear, actually, as somebody who is, watching this industry, have you noticed any particular trends?
I think the bottom bar is more heavily utilized than I've seen elsewhere, where that's really prominent and very good place to be looking to interact with stuff down there.
Yeah, absolutely. And Apple kind of encourages that, right, with putting the window control down there, and it's an easy place for you to glance. If you're glancing up, of course, then they have their system control that you're going to bring up, so you don't want to conflict with that. So, we've certainly found ourselves putting more making use of a bottom bar.
One thing I discovered last night which I didn't realize this was a thing. I knew you could pinch with two hands to zoom into a window, make it bigger. I thought it was the same as grabbing a corner of the window and making that window bigger. But they're different. You can actually make the window bigger and zoom in and make it even bigger, and the X and the little handle will be bigger as well. It's a zoom rather than an enlargement, which I found just very curious that actually exists as a thing.
Yeah, that is interesting that it's different at all. Given that one is a lot more more obvious, I guess, than discoverable than the other.
Yeah. No, I discovered it's not as crisp for like videos because it's a zoom. It's not trying to. It's a different behavior. It was interesting to realize that because I did that with I was playing a TV show on the TV app, and let me try pinching it. It's like, oh, this is bigger. The X looks bigger. Let me try, and you can still grab the handle in the corner and make it even bigger than it would naturally be. So that was interesting.
Right. I think it's a way that you like if you. I'm sorry, I don't know the answer to this as I propose it, and it's about one of our own apps. I'm sitting here talking.
Yeah.
But I think in OmniGrapple, for example, if you use this 2-finger expanding gesture, you would be able to zoom in on the canvas without necessarily making your window itself larger as part of the theory.
Yeah, different.
But if you're in a fixed-sized window, like an iPad window, then zooming in on the content is also going to grow your canvas because the quote-unquote iPad that you're using in visionOS has to grow to match.
Yeah. And Safari does the similar concept where you're zooming into the web page rather than the window. So yeah, different apps and behave differently for that. Yeah. I really wish iPad apps could be more granular with their sizes. Like it'd be nice if it had the full range of size classes as you do on iPad OS, but right now it's just landscape or horizontal.
Right. Yeah. It seems like that is some low-hanging fruit that maybe will be addressed soonish.
Hopefully. Yeah. And they don't let it linger like they did iPhone apps on the iPad, and they finally fixed that with Stage Manager a little bit.
Yeah.
So, one thing I wanted to get to before we get to the apps was that your company purchased Apple Vision Pros for the entire development team. And were any other roles? Was it just the developers included in who's?
It was the whole team, anybody in the company. So, we wanted to make sure that if you're talking to somebody in tech support, of course, and you're asking a question about how our apps work on your Vision Pro, that you're not talking to somebody who doesn't have a Vision Pro themselves and
they can
experience in using it.
Yeah, they can use it and test it and know it. Yeah.
Yeah. So, so everybody has. We just decided to make it standard equipment.
That's awesome. Yeah, and I'm curious. You guys, as you mentioned, are mostly remote. Have spatial persona meetings been a thing? I know it's limited to 5, but I'm not sure if that's something you guys have been using in free form boards. And I don't know.
We have not been using it. We've thought about it, and we thought about like one of the things that. As we think about things that we are adding to our own products that might make use of that sort of thing, of course, that's a case where. But most of our meetings, we don't know what setting somebody's going to be in, so we still use the same technology that we're using, which is a self-hosted Jitsi server.
Gotcha. Yeah. Cool.
People will sometimes connect to that and be in using a persona in a flat, they're flat 2D persona, not the 3D. With presence, but probably more often me than anybody else. Although the very first day that we all got them, the very next meeting that happened, there were a lot of personas that showed up before people were like, "Oh, maybe is this weird? I don't know." I think I'm taking this.
That's great. And then, has there been a general consensus with the developers working on the app? Have some taken a shine to it and really love this new platform, and others that are preferring to work on the Mac and iOS components, or is everyone pretty enthused by that platform?
I would say there's a range. I mean, I don't think anybody dislikes the platform. They find it fun. They find it, interesting, enjoy. It's fun to show off to family or whatever. When they come to visit in-laws or something, they'll show here's the dinosaur coming out of the kitchen. But I would say, there are definitely a few of us that are very enthusiastic about using it all the time, and that will enjoy working on in the space, working on apps. I think everybody enjoys working on our apps, and that any of our developers who are building our apps enjoy that process as long as they can figure out how to make it comfortable for them. Some people like you have had to struggle to figure out, all right, what's a good comfortable fit for me, and they haven't necessarily experimented with all of the different strap options from third parties and stuff to sort that out. So I feel lucky that that I haven't had that struggle. Yeah. But there's I would just say there's a wide range, and it's fun. And much like I expect people's reactions are to the platform in the first place. But a big piece of that again is this is so early. We don't yet have a lot of apps. We're trying to build some of those apps, and I'm sure other people are working on their apps at the same time.
Yeah, and general feelings about visionOS as a new platform versus, say, when the iPhone, iPad, and Watch launched. It's, of course, probably a smaller market with the price point, but what are your general feelings? This early on, you've been at all of those. I believe, yeah.
I would say, I can already do so many more things on this platform than I could in the iPhone in month 4 or whatever.
Yeah, web apps.
Yeah, exactly. And we had all the web apps here on day one, and with bigger screens, bigger windows. So it's plus all of these third-party apps, plus all of the iPad apps that at least were turned on as being compatible, and so I feel like as a completely new platform, it's doing pretty well. But I still expect it to be, a thing that takes years really for it to take off. I don't necessarily expect it to replace any of the other platforms because it's not really the same. It's not trying to operate in the same space as those things, but it augments the other platforms really.
Yeah, especially the Mac, as you've noticed, and hopefully it starts augmenting, the iPad in different ways as well.
One of the bits of feedback that I heard from one of our support team recently was that, he really enjoyed. In the past, when he would go to visit the in-laws, he would bring, a bunch of different devices with him. And now he finds that he can often just bring his phone and his Apple Vision Pro, and that's or maybe, the laptop as well. But it sort of takes the role of so many of those other things, and just in one kind of compact package.
Yeah, no, I'm enjoying the experience of screens everywhere. It's
right.
It still impresses me, and it's just delightful to use the operating system.
Good, yeah.
So let's dive into the apps. Before we dive into anything in particular, I'm just curious about this aspect of, so when the iPhone launched, that brought with it unique features like GPS and like this new map and OmniFocus and being aware of where you are to accomplish tasks. And I think the iPad had unique features for that platform. And all these features kind of make their way into, we have the map on other platforms now, the Mac even, I'm pretty sure. Anything about the visionOS hardware OS that you've discovered so far that's like, oh, that's awesome, let's bring this to the visionOS app to start?
There are definitely things that I've been thinking about that would be visionOS only features in the future, right? Because there are things that are so much easier to do now that you have this effectively infinite canvas that you can use for building your apps, and that the canvas is not even just 2D, but it's also layered and angle. That you have so much more room to operate it, and there's a lot more room for creative ways to present interfaces and so on. Because it's not our only platform, I also have to remind myself, okay, well, I can't spend too much time on just that and have people wonder, did Omni drop off the base? Why are there no updates for anything else? But it's something I look forward to using more and more as time goes by, and hopefully, as the market for this sort of content grows, then more people can appreciate it.
Yeah, for sure. So OmniFocus. I think this was the first app on iPhone and iPad. Is that correct? Or was OmniGraffle first on iPad? I'm trying to remember.
OmniGraffle and OmniGraph Sketcher were first on iPad.
Okay, that makes sense, being what the iPad is. And OmniPlan was actually first on Vision Pro, and we'll talk about that in a bit here. So yeah, it's kind of interesting. Every platform's had a different kind of launch launch app.
Right.
Yeah. So with the OmniFocus, I noticed right away that you guys utilize a sidebar, a top bar, a bottom bar, and if you hit the little eye in the top bar, that expands the inspector panel out to the right. How did you kind of discover this UI as making sense? Because I think it's kind of brilliantly laid out how you have the 4 quadrants and different stuff goes in the different places.
Oh, thank you. I mean, I think as we talked about earlier, the bottom part of an app is a lot more prominent now, and a lot more sort of easy to access because that's where your hands are coming from. You don't want your hands necessarily to have to reach up and cover the rest of the window to do something. If you were physically reaching toward it, you don't. Right. Most of the time, you don't necessily need to do that. Of course, you can use.
Sometimes I forget and do anyways.
Right. So that had us thinking a little bit about, what does it make sense to place down there? What kinds of tools maybe do you want easy access to at all times, and so on? Of course, we already had our perspective bar that we had now, that we just brought to all platforms in version 4. And we wanted to make sure that was also had a prominent role, and the natural place for that to go was on the left where it is everywhere else. Or maybe I should say on the leading edge, because in right to left environments, it's over on the other side. So there's that. And then similarly, the inspector, when we first started out, all of these things were kind of embedded in one window, and, just like they were on the iPad.
Yeah.
And that felt like a missed opportunity. Let's just put it that way, right? For one thing, the content, the size of your outline, you don't really want that necessarily to be changing size and shifting, getting smaller just because you decided you wanted to see the inspectors or the sidebar or the perspective bar or whatever. You figured out kind of, here's the layout that makes sense for me for the outline. And then when you have infinite space to work with, obviously you have to deal with the constraints on these other screens where you've got a fixed size that you're dealing with. But in this infinite space that we have for doing layout on the Vision Pro, it made sense to say, okay, well, let's when that inspector comes out, let's just go ahead and animate it around this way and bring it up forward as its own ornament over on the trailing side of the window. And so then the top ornament, we took a little bit of inspiration from Safari and how Safari deals with its location bar kind of entering a URL and so on. And now Safari does something that we wished we could do that it turns out we don't have any API to do, which is a little bit of eye tracking, where you can look at that section and have your tabs expand to become more visible, and we can't do that. so we had to just actually have buttons that you would tap, but then we could go ahead and expand a little bit for like doing a search, for example.
Yeah. And then one thing I love is just the infinite resizing of your window. Like if you just want to look at the forecast as a big long week view, you can just make the app nice, wide, and skinny. Like, what went into making sure the app resized in a graceful way where it allowed for something quite ridiculous, I think, of just let me look at my calendar as a big, tiny, narrow window up there.
Right. Well, we had to think about what are the constraints that we need to apply or want to apply in this new environment. And so we just kind of, built it, and we started out with no constraints, and then, well, clearly that's wrong. You can resize it down to 0 height or down to, seeing only half of an icon or something.
Right.
Like that's not very useful. So, okay, what is the minimum height? Okay, fine. That's, we'll set that out. Now, what is the maximum height? Well, mostly, I guess, let's leave that up to the user to decide, right? If they want to make it really super tall window and put it over on the side somewhere and push it back out of the way, why should we stand in their way? So then it's just a matter of testing it to make sure that works. And then of course, the same discussion happened around the width and what's the minimum width, what's the maximum width.
Yeah, and I believe OmniFocus can launch multiple windows, so you could have like one of forecast and another of a different project. Is that right?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's really important in this environment to not treat it like like you're just stuck on with the limitations of an iPad or an iPhone.
Yeah. How do you do that again? I remember doing it. I'm not exactly sure how I remember I did that.
Well, the easiest way is probably to long press on one of the perspective icons. So, for example, if you see, you're looking at your inbox and you maybe want to open forecast in a different window. So you just so you look at the forecast icon, and you hold your fingers together, and then it'll pop out a little contextual menu, and one of the options on that menu is open a new window.
Gotcha. Yeah. Cool. Yeah. And then the bottom bar in OmniFocus. Have you considered a way of letting users add some of their own little icons in there for stuff that they access frequently?
Yeah, absolutely. So we would love to have customizable toolbars everywhere. Like we added customizable toolbars not that long ago to our iPad apps, our document-based iPad apps, I should say, specifically. And we looked at doing that on visionOS, and the experience didn't seem to be quite there yet for Apple's APIs for doing that.
Okay.
And so, especially if you're trying to do it down in that, it just doesn't even work down in that bottom ornament.
Gotcha.
And so,
which to me seems the most natural place. It's the one with the most room to add stuff. It would appear to me, at least.
Right. So I agree. I think that would be a great place for adding some custom content. It's a place that if you resize your window large, that's something that will resize larger with it if you have more content that you want to display down there. Otherwise, it'll just stay, go up to its maximum size and then let the window grow past it. But yeah, it's a natural place to add some customization, but we'll have to build it ourselves. Of course, our primary objective as we were building these apps, we wanted to make sure that it was easy for a person new to OmniFocus, for example, to learn it while still keeping, all of the powerful features that our experienced users have come to rely on. So,
and with visionOS, you have to strike the balance of some users will be in keyboard trackpad mode, other users will just be using eye tracking. And how do you strike that balance of making it accessible enough to just use with eye tracking and voice, and those that want to use more advanced input methods?
Right. So one of the big things that we had to think about designing for visionOS was what are those really, we tried to design it all so that you didn't have to have a keyboard and a trackpad. We didn't want to put up a little alert like Freeform does, where when you first launch it saying, well, you can use this to video, but if you really want to edit content, you're probably going to want to use a keyboard and a trackpad. We might end up getting there when we do OmniGroup, because maybe we'll have similar sorts of constraints that we're worrying about that they had to worry about with Freeform. But for OmniFocus, we really wanted to make sure that everything was accessible with just the device. And so the first thing we had to do was scale up the targets so that they were comfortable eye tracking targets, which are larger than the iPad or iPhone sort of touch targets. So typically on the iPhone or iPad, you want to do something that's at least 40 points. They often recommend 48 points in size in terms of this is what your finger can distinguish between, so you're not accidentally tapping on the neighboring thing. But with your eyes and visionOS, you probably want more like 60 or 64 points. But it's different because with the tap targets, you care about being able to tap sort of anywhere within those 48 points or whatever. Whereas with visionOS, you actually don't want to be looking at the edge. You don't want to attract people's vision toward the edge. You want to leave space between things, a buffer, And so you have more margins between items, or padding between items, or spacing between items, however you want to refer to it, white space between items. but the items themselves can be relatively small just to attract the eye to that position, and then it's less likely to accidentally drift off where it might be misinterpreted as looking something else. And so so that was sort of how we thought about those constraints. Like, how do we now spread out the interface, but maybe keep the elements small enough that they're not, growing to fill the space and then being right next to each other and being distracting. And it was really interesting when we then actually started using the devices rather than just the simulator, in that your eyes are always kind of doing little microsaccades where they're moving around a little bit, and it's easy for them to suddenly be looking at the thing right next to what you were intending to look at. Whereas if you're using the simulator, you can put the mouse over an item and it will just stay right there. You don't have to worry about it accidentally triggering something else. So then we started having to think about not just what does the central content of a control look like, but how does it highlight as well? Because everything on visionOS that is interactive highlights when you look at it to help you give you the feedback that it's interactive. And those shapes, when we initially turned that on, we realized, oh, wow, look at these ugly shapes we have for some of our content, and we need to go fix that so that this looks good for visionOS.
Yeah, the eye tracking, it's phenomenal. And then occasionally it just gets all out of whack, and it's like, please get me to settings before I accidentally delete something I don't want to and reset eye tracking. Because occasionally it's like, oh gosh, I just need to get to eye tracking and reset this up. And then the other thing regarding eye tracking is the iPad apps. It's very notable when developers don't support the trackpad with the hover states, because if you open, say, Discord in visionOS, which doesn't support any hover states, that is completely blind to eye tracking. You're just like guessing, am I looking at the right thing? And that's a great test to know how well eye tracking is doing if you can navigate Discord on visionOS.
Right.
Yeah. I'm not sure if you've tried that or not.
I have not tried Discord yet.
It is fun on visionOS. It's good to have a trackpad handy for that one.
Right.
Yeah. So in designing visionOS app, have you learned anything that you want to bring to the other platforms in any way?
I think the answer is yes, but I'm trying to think of specifics right now. Well, I guess one specific example was as we thought about what is the experience going to be for installing an Omni Automation plugin. And we thought about, well, how can we do this easily on visionOS? And traditionally, what we've done for our plugins is we said, well, go to a web browser, just download it from wherever the plugin's being published on a web page, and the plugin will download. And when it gets downloaded, then you'll use your local operating system tools to open that file in our app, and now the plugin will prompt to say, where do you want to install it, or do you want to install it, do you want to approve this, and so on. And we realized that if we use that flow on visionOS, it really was kind of, it just felt sort of slow and burdensome, right? To go to a web page and then end up going to the Files app and then finding the file, and then you could open it in our app. But it was just more steps than we wanted to have to take. So instead, we invented this thing called install links, and so now if you go to the Omni Automation website for OmniFocus and you look for any of the 100 plus plugins that are available there for it, you just tap on an install link. It opens straight into the app. The app then prompts and says, okay, would you like to install this thing? And so, Sal's tagline for it was look, tap, and approve, that you don't have nearly the number of steps involved that we used to have to install a plugin. And then we brought that, once you've done that for visionOS, it makes sense to do the same thing for all of the platforms. And so we brought that to everywhere to, answer your question.
And then one clever interaction I noticed is if I tap the sidebar and say, forecast or projects, and I tap that thing again, it expands the view. I thought that was just very clever and delightful. So like if you're in projects, it'll then show you all your projects. Same for tags. For forecasts, if you tap it twice, it'll just show you your month view, which is, I just love that. How'd you come upon this approach of just like, oh, how can we expand the window in unobtrusive way? And this, yeah, it works well.
Sure. So where that feature originated actually was on the iPhone.
Okay.
As we were thinking about, well, how are we going to take this experience that we're used to having on the Mac of being able to have an optional sidebar, or that we've also then brought to the iPad of the optional sidebar where we have a sort of similar space in terms of our window space available. Well, now that we're on the iPhone, what are we going to do?
Yeah.
We realized that a sort of nice shortcut was just to tap that icon again and then have it bring in that sidebar. So obviously that's not exactly what we've done on visionOS. The gesture is the same, but on visionOS, then as we thought about, well, and what does this look like? Well, of course, it makes sense to implement this in a way that understands that now I'm in a space where it's okay to resize the window and the content and have it just, again, we want to give people as nice an experience as we can there.
No, yeah,
it was fun to design this and build it.
Yeah, and it was just a fun like discovery. It's like, oh, this is nice. Yeah,
I'm glad you enjoyed it. Yeah.
Do you have any other favorite bits of UI you put into OmniFocus for visionOS that we haven't chatted about yet?
Oh, it's some of the tweaks that were sort of the most fun to develop. I don't know how much they matter that much to customers, but were parts where we actually got to leverage the 3D environment of using visionOS. So of course it was fun to leverage this infinite canvas and be able to have a big window and so on. But it was also fun to say, okay, well here, as we bring out the inspector, let's make it animate kind of first back around a little bit and then come back around forward over onto the other side when it goes in and out. Or when we added, when we first did the perspective bar, we had the exact same badges on it that we have on a flat screen. And I realized, well, we're faking these shadows in this environment where we could have real shadows. There's no reason for this to be faked up this way. So I went ahead and brought that around. It made the badge layer its own 3D layer where it comes forward about 5 or 10 points, I don't remember. And then, if you look, slide your head back and forth, you can actually see the parallax of it moving differently than the icons behind it. And what was another? Oh, I guess the last was when it was one of the last things we developed actually was we were doing the intro screens, the sort of welcome screens when you first launch the app. And our graphics artist, Jarek, had already done these sort of great icons that he did for a t-shirt and so on, this scene with the moon and some trees and so on. And I thought, well, what if we did this as a little 3D kind of a multi-layer thing? Like, I don't know whether you had this as a kid, but I remember like going to my grandma and grandpa's house and they had some of these 3D layered things where you'd have layers of glass and a flat picture on each layer, but then you could sort of look at it from different angles and it looks semi 3D. And so we did that with our welcome screen where we had several different layers. Then as you swipe, you notice that.
That's awesome. Yeah. So one of my most delightful discoveries in OmniFocus was this ability to scan a document with the visionOS app using a nearby device. So if you hit this attachment icon and select Scan Document, it gives you a selector, and I could even pick out my 2017 iPad Pro from the list. And what it does when you do that, it opens the camera app in like a special scanning mode. The device can be completely locked when you're doing this, and then it saves scans right over to the Apple Vision Pro. Is there an API for this? I've not seen others do this.
So I have to say that is all completely Apple platform magic. We didn't have to write a line of code to make that happen, other than to use Apple's API. I guess we wrote a lot of lines of code rebuilding our app in SwiftUI.
Yeah.
And I don't know if this is limited to SwiftUI or if this is also available in UIKit for visionOS, but whatever. We got that benefit out of it.
That's amazing.
So, without having to do any work on our part specifically around document scanning.
Yeah, I was flabbergasted. I've not seen that in other visionOS apps. It might be there, but I've not seen it yet. And it's like, oh, this is really clever. This is great.
Right. Somebody who works on visionOS has got to be that. Yes, finally somebody's using this feature that we built, and I've just been waiting for somebody to leverage it.
Yeah, I wonder if it works with the new iPad Pro's advanced scanning to get rid of shadows. I'm sure it does.
Right? Oh, that'd be cool. Yeah. Yeah. I would hope.
Yeah, but that was super cool to see. And then you guys also facilitate just photos and files very easily, as expected. But there's also this awesome audio interface where you can pause the recording as you're doing it, which I think's that's a nice little thing in there as well as you're writing your notes. Have you considered adding some way of transcribing those recordings? I'm not sure if that's beyond the scope of...
I have, yeah, no, we originally wrote that feature, goodness, we might have originally written it for Outliner on the iPhone, actually, or the iPad. I think it was on the iPad, yeah.
As you're in class taking notes, you can record the lecture.
Exactly. So you can have it recording as you're then sort of typing in this outline. And so the idea is not that you're recording yourself necessarily, but that you're recording whatever. So if you missed anything, you could go back and you have that as a reference. Was sort of the idea. Or attorneys use that as well with Outliner. But I have certainly found transcription to be very useful for me over the years, and it would take up a lot less space, of course, if you didn't have to store all of this audio. So I would love a feature in there that went along those lines. And now you have me wondering what Apple might have up their sleeves, and
an AI API for that kind of stuff. Maybe. Yeah. And then something I'm curious about in the view options for the visionOS app, there's a special Apple Vision Pro layout with the ability to enable a custom row layout. What are you able to customize with this? I'm on the standard OmniFocus. I'm not sure if this is a pro feature.
Okay. Yeah, there's a pro feature there where, this is just something general for OmniFocus across the platforms, which is we decided that because every platform has its own form factor, the fields that are visible on one device, as you decide, to customize a device to, for example, you might want to display due dates in forecast, right? That's an obvious one. Or you might want to display completion dates in your completed perspective. But the fields that are visible on one device might not make sense to have visible on another device because the screen sizes are different. And so if you have a wide screen, you're going to have a different set of device fields that you might want to work with all the time than if you have a really small screen like your iPhone. And so when we brought the app to visionOS, then of course we did the same thing where we decided, okay, well, you would want to be able to customize it for the Vision Pro separately from your Mac and your iPad and your iPhone. And so they're all different size sort of device layouts, basically, that the other way we could have done that is we could have said, well, you just customize it for the device you're on right now. This iPad is different from that iPad and so on. But then if you upgrade from one device to another, you're having to re-customize all of your perspectives. And we thought it would be better to sync them all, everything between the same device class, but not show them across every device. So that's how we ended up with that particular feature. And you can customize it globally in standard, which is probably what you're seeing, which then applies to all of your perspectives at once. And then in Pro, you can customize it per perspective. So you can decide, okay, well, now my today perspective lists these things, and my, whatever your custom perspectives are. Gotcha. They can each list their own things.
Okay. Yeah, that makes sense. And yeah, it's as a 2 Apple Watch person, it's nice to have that stuff sync, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
So the other thing I noticed in settings, you can open calendar events in Fantastical as well as Apple Calendar. Was this inter-app linking just as easy here as it was on iOS?
Yeah, it's exactly the same.
Same links and everything.
Everything's the same. Yeah, it helps that they presumably also kept their same code for responding to those links, so that they would still work the same way.
Yeah, and then notifications. This is a brand new platform, whole new notification paradigm. So I'm curious, first off, how do you configure your own notifications in OmniFocus, and is it different on the phone versus the Vision Pro?
It's not really different. Yeah, all of that API I think worked out to be pretty much the same. The one area, just maybe a little, what are the differences? The big thing that ended up being different was we don't have any equivalent to the widgets, right? So the things that you would have on your desktop, yeah, and Apple did a lot of work with widgets just last year, right? With support for common sort of widget code everywhere and interactive and everything else. It would be lovely if that came to visionOS in the future.
As a side question, if we don't get widgets, visionOS 2, would it ever make sense on that sidebar to have, forecast and like widgets and a way to just like build your own widgets with these little mini windows that launch as kind of fake widgets almost?
Yeah, I could imagine, certainly there are third-party apps now on visionOS where you can put your floating widgets wherever with your clocks and your
battery,
you've seen. Your home monitoring and whatever else.
Yeah.
And so I think it could certainly make sense that you would pop off a little widget window, and we could even share the code with our current widgets implementation, and then you would just drag that to be wherever, and it would be the same as a forecast window on another platform, forecast widget, or any other perspectives widget.
Right. Yeah. How do you feel about Notification Center in visionOS? This kind of horizontally scrolling bar.
It's interesting. I mean, I've used it.
It's fun to play with. I don't know. It's tactile.
I like that it's pretty easy to get to. And it's pretty easy to navigate through. Although, like right now, if I try to open it, and it's kind of blocked because I've got the FaceTime thing that's a status that's right over it.
Yeah.
And now I can't do anything else, presumably, until I exit this call.
Right.
So, which is kind of okay because I'm not trying. I don't really want to be distracted with any notifications that are going on right now. But it's, I mean, I don't think it's bad. Certainly, it's, and the access is nice, and it's nice that the color is there to kind of tell you whether there's something new that wants your attention or not, or that something's recording your audio or whatever. I don't know, but.
And it's nice that you can tap a notification and look at it in an immersive environment, like you're in the middle of a movie and you can look at it, and it doesn't yank you out of that. If you decide to act on it, it'll just yank you out, but you can at least look at it there.
Yeah, I'm not sure there's anything wrong with its interface per se. It's just I might find it too. When I navigate it, I'm almost always navigating it with vision and touch, and it's maybe too easy to not know what's going to happen. Like accidentally trigger the wrong thing in it. And then now you've launched another app, or you've closed your window, or you've done something that you didn't mean to do.
Where do you feel the visionOS version of OmniFocus really shines? Like the iPad, its weekly review is like you got your coffee. It's great little tablet for that. iPhone, perfect companion with location as you're driving by. Boom, let's do this. Does visionOS have a certain place in your life yet for that kind of stuff?
Yeah, well, it's interesting. I listen to how other people are talking about how they use their, obviously there's the way that I use my visionOS device, and I know that I'm not necessarily typical. So I try to listen to what other people are doing as well, and hear their stories. So, like in my life, with my Mac window, I tend to have a whole bunch of windows open inside that Mac, and I just have a lot of things going on. But a lot of people really like being able to cut down on that clutter and then just kind of focus in on one activity. And it's sort of fun that visionOS actually supports both of these things, right? Where, I think it was on maybe the Cortex podcast where I heard Mike and CGP Grey talking about the different ways that they use their their visionOS device, and they both enjoyed it, but they both could not understand the other person. Right?
Yes.
They would not use it the other way at all. Where Gray really liked having a focused environment where he has just one thing straight front and center, and everything else is then white sands or whatever, like the least distracting environment possible. And whereas Mike was using these windows all over the place for all of his different notifications, and it makes sense because they're doing different work. One is trying to coordinate a bunch of activities, and you want to be able to see all this stuff going on at once. And Gray is doing this creative writing activity where he wants to just zero in on one thing. And so I also heard David Sparks talk about how he was using it, and he was very much using his Vision Pro in that focused mode where he would have one thing, like his writing app right in front of him. He'd be there typing and working on that. And then an idea would come to him for something that he might want to put in OmniFocus. And so what he would do is then look up at the ceiling, which is where he's left his OmniFocus window, where it's normally not distracting him.
Right. Yeah.
But he just looks up and he puts his, whatever it is up there. And then he looks back at his thing and he continues. And the distraction was as minimal as possible, but still having OmniFocus available all the time. And that sort of, I think that sort of story is really interesting, just to hear how different people might have very different, they can adapt their use of OmniFocus to fit the workflow that makes sense for them. And visionOS is so adaptable with its range of workflows, from the single window focus workflow with your environment, tuning everything else out, to the dashboard of Windows everywhere environment, where OmniFocus might be several of those dashboards. You might open several OmniFocus windows with a project here and a forecast here, and and go to town. So I would say it doesn't have, because visionOS is so flexible, much like the Mac is flexible. I wouldn't say that it has just a single use case that where OmniFocus makes sense, but a lot of different ways that people.
Yeah. One of the things I love about visionOS is, so like on a Mac or even an iPad with Stage Manager, you can have all these windows right in front of you, but it's confined to the screen size of that device. And I super love having a bunch of windows, but it's not cluttered. I just let me glance over there. Let me deal with that. 'Cause I realize most of the time when I'm multitasking, I'm really doing one thing at a time. I'm not actually physically writing as well as... So it's nice to just let me look at that. Let me not close it so I can come back to that. And it's very nice just being able to put windows kind of around you and you know where they're at because you put them there. Yeah.
Right, exactly.
Yeah. So, were there any design elements that changed from the initial concepts that you sketched out to the final launch that you kind of didn't get a sense of what the final design should be until you started to have an Apple Vision Pro to live in and get a sense of how that OmniFocus should be?
Oh, definitely. Yeah.
Yeah.
Many of the things, once we actually had the device and started seeing, as I mentioned earlier, like the highlights when you look at particular interactive elements and so on, suddenly those highlights became a much more important design element. You wanted to make sure they didn't have sharp edges, corners, or all sorts of things that. So from those tiny details to the larger details of how do you want to manage multiple windows? Like, how do we present our release notes? So in on an iPad or an iPhone, well, obviously you're going to present your release notes just right over your main window content, because where else can you put it? But our initial app release on visionOS did the same thing, right? Because it was sharing a lot of that same code, and it just landed right there. Our Mac has always presented it in a different window, and we realized, well, of course this should be more like a Mac. This is an environment that is more like a Mac. We should leave those release notes in their own separate window, so if you want, you can close them right away like you would on those other devices. Or if you want, you can drag it over to the side and read them while you're continuing to work with the app, or do whatever you want. But there's so much more flexibility to having multiple windows than just trying to layer everything in every activity in a single window. And we started doing the same thing with like our Omni automation documentation, pulling that out into its own window for the same reasons. And I'm sure we're not done yet.
Right.
we again, it's like on the one hand, it feels like because it has been such a big part of my life over the last few months. It feels like I've had it a lot longer than just a few months, but it has only been a few months.
Yes.
And so there's still a lot more that I want to do with it.
Yeah. Anything of note about the locations implementation on visionOS? It's one of those areas where you can use two hands and pinch in on the map and kind of pan
Right.
around and stuff. Yeah.
I mean, we added the same, as you guessed or alluded to earlier, we added the same nearby perspective on visionOS that we originally introduced on the iPad. Was it? Maybe it was the iPhone, whichever.
Yeah.
And it works the same way, basically. So you have the perspective. You have a map. You can have your tasks show up on the map and work with it. We did have a little bit of work to do around how annotations work and were presented in this environment, and then of course there were some challenges around like how that code is not as mature in Swift UI as it is in UIKit. But you really want to use Swift UI to get layers. And so what we wanted to do was kind of have your annotation float up over it. And we kind of get that to happen by layering a Swift UI thing inside a UIKit thing. But then we discovered that as you scrolled off, it would end up being sort of weirdly truncated on the side of the screen. And it just looked weird to have this floating element on top of your map suddenly hit the edge and get cut off with the same sides as the rest. So, speaking of other places where the design and the implementation ended up diverging from the design, and the design then iterated, and we came up with
one perspective I just thought of. If I was a frequent flyer, I would for sure add a travel mode enabled Vision Pro perspective, where if I'm on a plane, here's the stuff I can do.
Right. Speaking of which, have you gone traveling at all since?
Only road trips. Nothing on the plane yet. It is fun to bring it to different, like we went up north mountains in New Hampshire, and it was fun to just capture some spatial videos outside for the deck, and yeah.
Nice. Yeah.
But yeah, I'm eager to try it in a plane one of these days. It is fun in a car though, like the dashboard just it doesn't know how to interpret those LEDs, and it's like they disappear sometimes, and
interesting,
wonky. Yeah. And I took a little spatial video while I was just sitting at the driver's seat in our car, and with all that light, it sure does look great. Just like I'm here in my car, and before I sell my car or whatever, just take a little spatial video of here's my car before I sold it. Yeah, kind of thing. Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah. Except for the dashboard does not come through in those cameras either. So just it's something.
Right.
But anyways, anything you can share about the roadmap for OmniFocus for visionOS? Anything coming up soon?
Well, we will, of course, be watching what Apple's doing.
Yes, they have a habit of changing plans.
Yeah. In general, right now, we're focused on sets of things that improve sort of all of our platforms at once, because we wanted, of course, to get a visionOS app out as quickly as possible. And we had positioned ourselves really well with the Swift UI rewrite that we just did for OmniFocus 4. So we were able to do that pretty quickly. But we have a lot of other stuff that we want to do that helps everyone, not just visionOS customers. So mostly our roadmap at the moment is around how do we improve that experience of the app for everybody everywhere. And in the upcoming release that we're working on right at the moment, actually there are a lot of things for the Watch app in particular, and syncing, like letting it sync directly with the iPhone to make syncing faster and things like that. So it's we have a lot of platforms now that we're kind of spread across.
Yeah.
think about.
Yeah, it's fun as the watch gets more and more advanced. What you're able to do on that platform too.
Yeah, absolutely. It's been an amazing thing to watch that develop.
Yeah. So, anything else about OmniFocus before we move on to OmniPlan?
Oh, let's go for it. Yeah.
Okay, OmniPlan. So, very briefly, because I'm not as familiar with this application, I wish I had a use for this app. Have you heard from people of non-traditional ways people are using OmniPlan? Because it's a cool app. I mean, it's
Oh, thank you. No, it's perfectly reasonable to not like. It's not an app for everybody, and we know that, and it's okay. So don't feel guilty. I know that I have heard of people saying, "Boy, it's a beautiful app. I wish I had more excuses to really, use it or do something with it," and I don't. So it's not a part of my life, but it is. But that's expected. It's not it's not going to be for everybody, and don't worry about trying to fit it into your life if it doesn't. I should maybe give a little background about how why it happened to be the first app that we brought to Vision Pro. So as we were thinking about our lineup, one of the and thinking about the tools that could really make use of this infinite canvas. As we were thinking about our product lineup and what would come to visionOS and what could really make use of that infinite canvas, I thought back to when my dad would bring home the Gantt charts that he used for his work. So he used to work on the Boeing 747, and he worked on the Saturn V, and he was a scheduler. So his job was to schedule out what the different teams were building in different places, and make sure that everything would come out as quickly as possible. That there wouldn't be delays transferring from one team to another along the process, and that everybody was kept busy and producing things as quickly as possible. And of course, for the Saturn V, we're in the middle of a space race, so there's time was of the essence. And for the 747, of course, they wanted to produce as many planes in as short amount of time as possible to keep the cost down. So he would bring home these Gantt charts, which on these rolls of paper that were just immense. He would roll them out across the living room floor, and then he'd pull up like a section of it on the coffee table, and he'd be sitting there studying it and thinking, okay, this team needs to start on this, but that other team is still using this tool, and by tool I mean like a wing assembly tool or something.
Yeah.
It fills a room,
right?
And so they can't actually start on that part of the project yet. So we're going to have to special order another tool in here and get it in there by the time that team gets to work, so that they won't be stalled out. And, finding these exceptions, I think, is how it referred to it on the schedule of where there was going to be a problem, and then marking it up so that you could take that back and to the team and think about it. Well, obviously, project planning has come a long way since doing this with pen and paper, pencil and paper, but you still have immense timelines. I'll think a lot of people on some of these projects, and these complicated dependencies, and it's still really great to be able to spread this out along a really wide surface. And now you don't have to be constrained even by the size of the room you're in, because as we know, you can make the window bigger and you can push it out back through the wall, and you can still tune into your environment, and then it won't even feel out of place. And just have this big chart then floating there that you can study and work on and do stuff with. But no, it's okay if not every person, anybody who's not a project manager probably doesn't care about this particular kind of problem.
One thing I'd love with visionOS 2 is an ability for a developer to have windows be like a curved TV almost, like have a slight curve on either edge so it kind of can wrap around you if you want it to make it super big. I don't know how they develop that in a way where you can choose between which mode you want to be in, because I'd imagine most of the time you don't want that. But for some apps like OmniPlan, it'd be kind of cool to just wrap yourself around a little.
Yeah, it'd be fun to kind of have like a little curved console going on.
Yeah.
Mission control setup,
right,
or whatever. Without having to do it in separate windows.
Right, yeah. One thing I absolutely love is, you mentioned animation before. OmniPlan has a very delightful animation as you switch between the three views in the left sidebar. Are these animations on the other platforms? And
They
yeah,
they are.
they
Yeah.
are okay.
We did that first. I don't remember which platform we did it on first, but whatever. They are on the platforms.
I would love an ability to slow that down just for fun, like you could with the old Mac. You hold Shift out, it like
Oh
slows
yeah,
down the minimize or whatever.
yeah, that would be fun. Just to watch this thing twirl into place.
As far as challenges bringing OmniPlan to visionOS, what, if any, did you have from a UI perspective in making it a simple to use tool in this platform?
Well, we had all of the same challenges, of course, that I mentioned with OmniFocus about adjusting the different sizes of things, thinking a little bit differently about the layout of the windows and how what makes sense now in this new platform, what bars things go in. And I don't even know if we, like, I think we did a good job for this first iteration, of course. But I also think that there's room for us to do better as we've now had a chance to use the device more. Like that was a launch day title, and we were doing it before we had a chance to. Our developers were working in the simulator, and just okay, how can we do this? And then of course we followed up with a number of quick updates once we got the hardware, so that it would, we knew what else we needed to improve.
Do you have any favorite aspects of the visionOS app outside of the infinite canvas kind of aspect of it?
Well, I love that it still has all of that same level of power that we have come to expect from the app on other platforms. That we have a big outline, we have collaboration. It's not collaboration the way visionOS might do with avatars around the
right.
So, although you could do that with just with screen sharing kind of a thing, but not where each person has their own copy of OmniPlan running. That would be interesting to do as a future sort of thing, I think. Not announcing product features, just speculating. But favorite things that are there now, I mean, really, I think having that large Gantt chart is the favorite thing for me. Yeah. It's not, we also have the large PERT chart, or we call it a network diagram. And so, when the Apple Lisa came out in 82 or 83? One of the earliest apps on there was called Lisa Project. And it was a project planning app where you would put together your project by drawing a diagram of, okay, well, here's a step, and then I'm going to connect it to these other steps. And you would sort of draw your dependencies that way. And so OmniPlan, in its network diagram mode, uses that same sort of approach where you have nodes representing each of the tasks that are involved in the project, and then you hook them up with their dependencies, and then you can assign resources and all of the advanced stuff that you end up doing. And so that's one way to visualize your and plan out your project. And then when you're ready to then turn that into a timeline, now you can say, okay, now show me the timeline for that same stuff. And it shows you now the same tasks, but arranged with an outline and arranged with, the dependencies as markings on the timeline graph, showing, okay, well, when this thing ends, this other thing can start, and so on.
Do you end up using OmniPlan for app updates, roadmap things, or is OmniFocus kind of your organizational tool, or what do you end up using yourself for that kind of stuff?
So some of both at different times. So it kind of depends on what the milestone is and what sort of project is and how predictable it is. Like OmniPlan is really good for scenarios where what steps it's going to take to get to the outcome, so you can actually plan out those steps, and that these dependencies are going to take that long as well. So it's really great for things where the problem space well in advance. And some good examples of that are things like construction projects, or maybe a project that you've done several times before. Like if we're doing a documentation project, we're writing the manuals and so on. We know here are the steps that we have to do, and then we have to get it localized, and then we have to, or maybe write the outline first and so on.
Or after an app's finished, getting ready for the marketing push, which is a predictable probably, step by step.
Exactly. Whereas then there are other milestones that we work on where we are doing a lot of sort of blue sky development where we have to research a problem, think about, okay, well, does this work? We have to test it out and explore it. And then, no, that didn't work. Let's, do a new design and iterate a bunch. And there, OmniFocus is a much better tool because what you want to do is capture kind of what's happening now and then what the next steps are without necessarily knowing all of the steps because they're not knowable yet, that you would need to get to your final outcome. And so their OmniPlan is not a great fit, but OmniFocus is better. And so I end up using a mix of both. And of course, we have also OmniPlan has collaboration in it, but OmniFocus does not. And so when we're in that other mode, really we end up using our internal collaborative tool a whole bunch for keeping track of what stage is this milestone in, and what else do we need to get done before it's done, and what has been tested, and so on and so forth.
Okay. So I'm curious, any ideas, maybe not an announcement, but just pondering what might be next for the OmniGroup with visionOS? I know a lot of people like to write, and the outliner might be fun there, or Graphel. What's coming next, do you think?
So hopefully it's no secret that both will be coming.
Yes.
We've tried to be clear about that. They're both so Omni. Neither of those apps are universal yet, where you buy them once on one platform and it's licensed for all of the others. And so the version and we don't want to sell a visionOS specific version of any of these apps. We want them to be part of our universal apps as we make each of them universal going forward. And so, of course, OmniPlan and OmniFocus are already universal. That made them really great choices to do as the first couple apps. OmniGraphel is, we're currently working on version 8. We have test builds out there that some folks are using and giving us feedback on. And when we release OmniGraphel for the other platforms, we intend to have Vision Pro be one of those platforms. So
excellent.
So it will just be a simultaneous release with everything else.
And currently, the iPad versions are available. I forget if they are.
They're not part of that test yet.
Okay.
So that is part of the work. In fact, a big chunk of that work just landed on Thursday last week, I think, if I'm recalling correctly. Which then means our Mac builds which have been where our testers have mostly been working, are now in a state where we have some fixing to do because of all this code that we shuffled around to. Backing up a little bit, this project that we're doing with OmniGraphel 8 involves making the app universal, which involves taking things like the inspectors and rewriting them in Swift UI. So it's one implementation that we use across all of the platforms instead of having a bunch of different platforms that we implement separately. And so as we make the app universal now, all of the features get to come everywhere, which makes the iPad apps stronger than they used to be, right? Like they used to be kind of limited versions of the Mac app. So they'll now have all of the feature set. And we just saw this with OmniFocus, where now it has all the feature set. We'll be doing this with OmniGraphel in version 8.
Very exciting.
And so it will actually be OmniGraphel 8 for all platforms instead of OmniGraphel 8 for Mac and 4 for iPad or whatever it would have been, under the old scheme.
Yeah.
And same for visionOS. So it will be OmniGraphel 8 everywhere. And the same thing will be happening with OmniOutliner 6.
Okay.
And we're pretty excited about that, but we don't...
Earlier on for that.
Yeah, we don't know the time frame yet.
Gotcha.
So.
Yeah. And hopefully... Well, I say hopefully, but WWDC... It'll be interesting. See if things get shaken up for any of the stuff that's in development.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm always curious to see what Apple is going to introduce each year, both in the platforms that we already have and the things we sort of expect them to and hope that they will make better, and then the surprises that we just don't see coming.
Yeah, you may have like a whole new set of AI APIs.
Maybe, something of that.
Right? Yeah. So any big hopes for visionOS 2, both as a user and a developer?
I think as a user first, one of the big things for me would be better window management.
Yeah.
Like I love the power and flexibility around where you can place windows and so on right now. But as I think about like all of the windows I have in my Mac environment, if I really wanted to bring that into the visionOS environment as a native environment, that's not manageable with the current windowing system. Like I want a way to be able to sort of hide and restore and maybe switch between workspaces or something. I'm not sure what exactly that looks like. Or maybe the windows are tied to the environments, or better window placement relative to physical locations. Like as you know, we can leave windows in places right now and walk away and come. But then from time to time, you need to reset your windows because you're somewhere else. And you need to get to your web browser, but it resets all the windows at once, and now all of your windows are stacked up wherever you are now,
Yep.
where you left them.
You occasionally lose them. It's like
So it would be fun to be able to pin a window and say, okay, well, this window really belongs in the laundry room, and it's got my it's my OmniFocus list of things that are relevant for the laundry room or the kit or for the refrigerator or whatever, right? Like those sorts of things. You could imagine doing it, but right now, while you could set them up, if you wanted to, you would end up setting them up again probably by the time you get back to it, or at least every few days or something.
It'd be nice to have like the concept of like stacks in some way of like using a hand gesture to go through a stack of windows or something. I don't know.
Right. That said, it's delightful how easy it is to move windows around, and it surprises me how well it works already, and that you can kind of toss them even and have them go out there or whatever. But excuse me, as I toss my Mac window.
Move windows with just holding the X even, which is kind of scary because if you mess it up, you're closing that window.
Right. Yeah. Better keyboard input. Both
navigating or also just being able to see the keyboard in environments.
Yes and yes.
Yes.
So part of it for me, I think, with the keyboard is like the little floating keyboard. That they give us.
Oh my God,
in particular is
so annoying.
All it ever is for me is kind of getting in the way, I guess. It's so hard to use. Like
the old Bluetooth keyboard hooked up, and it's constantly in your face. Like, get out of here! I've got this keyboard hooked up.
Right. And I don't know why I don't have access to any numbers or punctuation on it. Like, why is it the tiny iPad keyboard when I've got all this infinite canvas to place a keyboard in? Why not give me the extended keyboard? Better keyboard input is, I guess, another big wish for me. Maybe if I were to do a third as a user, I would say third-party environments, maybe. Like let people open that up so we're not just. I've been sitting here waiting for Apple to fill in those missing environments that are coming soon.
Yeah.
But wouldn't it be nice if we didn't have to wait for Apple and other people could start producing those?
That'd be cool. Would the OmniGroup do an environment?
No, that would be as a developer wish list. That's not what we're on.
We are not. We're on the user question. Yeah, that would be fun. But yeah, third-party environments would be amazing. I would love to see that happen. So as a developer, what's kind of missing still for you?
Well, I'm going to take the flip side of two of those at least. So I would say better windowing APIs. Like right now, the developer doesn't have so much control over some of the positioning or angling, or it's. There are things that I would like to be able to do that I can maybe only do if I decide to open a 3D environment, and I would love a little bit more flexibility in like deciding where windows are placed relative to other windows without making them ornaments of that other window. So, but just where do they start out? Like maybe the release notes right now, they end up launching right over the other screen. And so you have one window on top of the other, and of course you can move it, but wouldn't it be nice if it just appeared to the side in the first place? While still being an independent window, we don't want to make it an ornament where it's tied to that window.
Yeah.
And then we also ended up making it so that like when we close our main window, if it was our last document window that was open, we automatically close that release notes window too, because otherwise, when you come back to the app, it just opens the release notes window. And from there, there's no way to get back to an open document.
Yeah.
You're just kind of stuck in your release notes. Like, and so, that's another place where it would be nice to just have a little bit more control over what are the windows, what are they open, what opens when your app opens.
Yeah. Have you started doing the thing where you'll tilt your head because the windows tilt with it?
Yeah, especially if you're looking up toward the ceiling, right?
Yeah,
like
yeah.
Lying on a couch or in bed and kind of just looking up at the ceiling and, oh, wait, these two windows aren't quite aligned. All right, I'm going to hold that one and I'm going to tilt my head until they look like they're okay. Otherwise, it's going to bug me forever.
Yeah.
And speaking of which, I wish there were a way to like tilt a window forward or backward, other than just like pushing it down or up, which
right,
and tilt it towards your head. But like maybe you do want something that's a little bit more like a keyboard that's lying in front of you without. I don't know.
Yeah,
we'll see.
Yeah, I mean that'd be cool with like OmniGraph. You have like a input tab, slab in front of it. You can just poke at. It's like here's a hexagon, and it throws it up on the canvas, so you can just stuff like that. Be interesting.
Yeah.
But yeah, right now they really don't want you to put stuff on a table. They just want it, horizontal in front of you.
Yeah. And speaking of putting stuff on a table, as a developer, also better typing keyboard input control. Like in particular, I'm thinking of better control for tabbing from one field to another, things like that. That are, I think the APIs are sort of theoretically defined, but they don't always seem to as reliable as we would like, and so you end up then having to tap from one field to another more often than we wish, which maybe isn't the end of the world, especially on visionOS where you just look at the other field and you tap it. But
yeah, I occasionally get the weird iPad issue in visionOS where it doesn't know where my keyboard should be. Like I've got Safari open, I've got the URL highlighted even, and I start typing and it does nothing. It's like, come on, this should know what I'm trying to do here. Yeah. So, yeah, keyboard stuff.
Maybe finger input in general. I don't know.
Yeah.
Gestures and things. But
yeah, I've mentioned this before, but currently they just use this tap. They have a second finger tap. They could do this as a tap. You could hypothetically do a finger and thumb as a different input for the system.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Maybe it's nice to that you have an option that doesn't always end up tapping on this. It's too easy to accidentally tap on things when you're just trying to watch movies. So.
Right, yeah. But it'd be interesting if they introduced like a right-click paradigm with one of your other fingers as the tap that does something different. I don't know if that'd be too complex for adding that to the system. Yeah.
And throwing a throw blanket over my lap is a way to.
With movies, if I'm like in a popcorn or snack mood, I'll change my hand tracking input to be my left hand that I'm not using, kind of thing.
Right.
Yeah, that was the trick I learned because that is a constant problem with that. It's like try to have popcorn. Be quiet.
But now I went back to user things, not developer things.
Yeah. All good. Anything else before we wrap it up?
I mean, overall, I guess I just want to say that I really love my Apple Vision Pro. I'm loving visionOS. I'm loving the experience overall. I enjoyed building our apps for it and enjoying building our future apps for it. I can't wait to see what comes next. And it's also fun to see what other developers are doing, even though I was woefully lacking in observations when you asked me about what other apps are out there.
Yeah, it's fun to see new apps pop on there every now and then. It's not as fast as I'd like it to be, but I saw Craft now has a native visionOS app. That's a fairly big app, and it's cool to see them slowly come out.
Yeah.
I hope visionOS 2 has a redesigned app store that lets you browse categories so I can see all the business apps, all the entertainment apps, because currently it's just search and hope for the best.
And then the editorial lists.
Yeah, that's all you get. Like back when the iPad released, I could see a complete list of every iPad app that was available and browse through that. And I remember doing that and found some cool discoveries that way. Yeah.
Right.
So, one could hope. Well, thank you so much for your time, Ken. Where can people learn more about the OmniGroup and your apps?
Well, our website is omnigroup.com. That's the best place to go to find out about our apps and everything else. Of course, we've got links to like our Mastodon place, social media spots there, and we have forums and so on. But it's all linked from our website. So
Excellent.
OmniGroup.com is the place to start. And if you're looking for me personally, the place where I participate the most actively online would be on mastodon.social as KKs.
Excellent. Well, thank you so much. Really appreciate your time today.
All right. Thank you, Tim.
Well, that's my discussion with Ken Case. My thanks to Ken for his time recording. My thanks to you for your time and attention tuning in. As a reminder, you can support the podcast over visionpros.fm/Patreon or by subscribing in Apple Podcasts. With that, I'll talk to everyone again real soon.